All right, so I say
There
got
we
it.
go. Now we're being live streamed. The
Yes.
fun of technology. Okay. Um, Coming over to see us be live streamed on LinkedIn so that I can see everybody's comments. So hold on 1 second for me, everyone. And here we are. Okay. Good morning, everyone, or I guess good afternoon, technically. Welcome to Beyond the Comfort Zone Live, a show that helps you step out of your comfort zone and into a place of growth and learning. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'm Aviva Wilmer, and I'm a Vistage chair here in Atlanta, Georgia. I lead 2 groups of incredibly driven and ambitious CEOs who want to accelerate towards their goals faster. Our peer groups are a mastermind of CEOs who come together regularly to share ideas and experiences and support one another, knowing that together they're going to achieve more than they would on their own. No matter how many years of experience a leader has, the reality is their knowledge is limited to what they know and to their experiences. They don't know what they don't know because they haven't been exposed to it yet. A peer environment creates opportunities to see the unknown and be more proactive and make better decisions. Today, I'm honored to bring to you guys Catherine Cates, who I have joining me. Catherine is a professional EOS implementer who works with small and mid-sized companies to help their leaders get the results that they're looking for. After a successful career in banking and corporate finance, Catherine took the entrepreneurial route, and she's led successful turnarounds, expanded the growth at a top medical staffing company, and she accelerated profits and improved operations for a major electrical contracting business. Her mantra is keep it simple, which she's going to share with us lots of tips and tricks on how to do that today. Welcome, Catherine. I'm really excited to have you with us.
Great. Thank you. Happy to be here.
For those of you joining us live, please put your questions in the comments. I am monitoring the comments, and we'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible today. Before we start, though, I'd love to get to know our guests. So as you guys know, I put a question related to the topic of the day. So how many hours are you spending a week doing clerical tasks? So that's the question for the day. I'm putting it right now into chat for everybody.
Be honest.
So
we won't tie your answers to your names.
I think it does tie them to their names. So while people are starting to answer that question for us, can you tell us a little bit about what EOS is?
Sure. So EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it's not software. It's how you run your business to get the best results. So how do you set a plan that is high impact and happens? How do you have great meetings that actually save you time and drive to those results that you have in your plan? How do you create an open, honest culture where issues get recognized and solved and not ignored? And how do you, good people want to have a winning week. So how do you create that visibility for your good people and create accountability so the things that you want to have happen get done? So people don't think of that as a system, but how all that happens is an operating system, and you have one, and you're getting the results based on how that system is. So I help companies consciously create that system in a simple, proven way to get better results in less time.
Awesome. That sounds like it'd be really helpful for business leaders in order to really translate down what their message is.
How do you get the biggest result for the least amount of time? We're absolutely focused on that every day in every process.
Now, EOS has a phrase, do less better.
Yes.
Can you tell me what that means and how to help CEOs do that?
Absolutely. So we're all about keeping it simple. You mentioned that's kind of my mantra. And the biggest thing is simplify. So that you're going to do less because you're going to create simple processes. So the fewer steps takes less time. And you want to make sure you're focusing on the most important things that will create the biggest result, and also the things that really need to get done this week, this morning. So don't get distracted by things that aren't important right now. So if you do the right things at the right time, and then you do them better. So you have the first step to make it better is to make a simple process, and then to have a process that everyone does it the same way. So you're creating great results every time rather than making mistakes every time.
Okay. How does a company go about creating a process like that?
So the first thing to do is just to recognize you have it, and we try to document it as simply as possible, like in a checklist mentality. So what are the key steps that you have to do? And then in everybody that touches that process, get everybody to review it and say, are there things here that we're doing that waste time? And so get rid of those processes, and then just get everybody on board to do it the right way every single time. So, here in Atlanta, Chick-fil-A is really popular, and they have all those lines going, and everybody there that works there is under 20, but somehow they get your food right. It tastes great. And they also are very nice to you. And that's because they follow a simple, proven process every single time.
What would you do to recommend, that people do to figure out what that right process is to go through those steps to simplify?
So again, look at your results, and and talk to everybody that's doing that process, and just draw it out. Again, what we recommend is what we call a 20-80 approach, as simple as possible, like a checklist and a few lines. So it's not a whole paragraph and paragraph. It's like a checklist written out, and then get that down on paper. And then just once you agree on it, if it's a really important process, have a scorecard that you're on track with those results. But make it part of your values that we do it, the Walmart Corp way, and make sure that everybody, because the good process frees up your best people. It doesn't trap people. It frees them up because they know they did their part, and the person ahead of them is going to do their part. So that builds a lot of energy.
You've worked with a lot of companies doing this. I'm curious, on average, how much time do you think people are spending in complicated processes that can be simplified in the companies that you've worked with?
Oh, absolutely. Tons of wasted time. And especially if it's not simple, mistakes get made. And so we say, if you don't have time to do it right, do you have time to do it again? Because if you do it wrong, you're going to have to do it over and over. And then you're going to have, not only are you having trouble in that process, but you've got customer complaints. So creating simple processes and doing them right every time is a huge time saver. Plus, it helps morale. You have more energy to bring to the job, because it's way more fun to pick up the phone or read an email and get somebody saying, boy, you were fabulous, I love the way you did it, instead of the 28th complaint call.
Yes, that is definitely a lot more fun. I would rather be celebrating than be getting negative feedback or corrective feedback, I should say.
Absolutely. And even, jet pilots, if you watch them, they have a checklist, and every single time they walk around the plane, they look at the tires and the vents on the plane. And the last thing on the checklist is flaps down, because if they don't lower the flaps, the plane won't take off. And about once or twice a year, somebody forgets, to lower the flaps. But if you have too much ego to go through a checklist, you might be that person. So
I wouldn't want to be that person.
value a good process. Don't have ego about it. Recognize you want to make sure you do it the right way every single time.
Is it hard for leaders to get the people on their teams to follow these processes? I'm sure a lot of these team members have done things their own way for a long time.
You have to make it a value that this is how we do it, and explain the value of not having mistakes, the customer satisfaction and retention, the time saving, the cost saving, and that also makes your business scalable. People want to create value, And if you're doing it a consistent way, then that makes your business scalable. For smaller companies, if you're the founder and if you're the only one that does it the right way, you're in a box because all the customers ask for you. If you can create processes and get your people to buy in that this will help us grow and get better results, then you've created scalability and very often also increased your profitability.
Awesome. Now, we named the session Delegate and Elevate today for a reason. So I'm sure people are wondering what those secrets are to delegating and elevating. Can you share a little more? How do you help leaders do that effectively?
Absolutely, yes. So the biggest thing is to track your time. To start with awareness, we ask people how much time they spend on clerical tasks. And most people don't really, your awareness of how much time goes by on those things. How much time do you spend in your email every day? You may not have considered that a clerical task, but that is a huge time sink for most people. And what if you set a goal that you would only spend an hour a day max in your email, maybe less, 30 minutes. Well, I know people that have achieved that. I'm open and honest, I'm not all the way there. But the first thing is to build awareness of the tasks and see how much time it takes and start saying, what could I delegate to somebody else? So we have a simple tool, and I will go ahead and share my screen.
Share it up. Let's see it.
Yes, so we are all about making it absolutely simple. So this piece of paper with 4 quadrants is a great exercise to do. So you answered the question before, how much time you spend on clerical tasks, but start as you go through your day, keep this sheet on your desktop and it's got 4 quadrants. The top left are things you're doing that you love to do and you're great at. And start recording how much time. This is what we call your unique ability. This is when you're the most creative, you're happy, and you're having the biggest impact on your business. You'd like to spend time in that quadrant. So how much time do you spend there? The next quadrant to the right are things you like and you're good at. Maybe not great, but you like. So this top half is the happy part of your day. The bottom half is hell. It's things you don't like. So the biggest trap is things you don't like to do, but you're good at. So maybe a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in smaller companies, are still doing invoicing. They're still paying bills, but it's hell. And maybe setting up appointments and very technical stuff. So that's the hell zone. But how much time are you spending in there? And then the worst of all is things that you don't like and you're not good at. So the first thing about delegating and elevating is awareness. And so just start tracking your time. Whatever you answered them, how much time you're spending on clerical or less valuable things, go back and look at this sheet and see. So it's a super simple exercise to do, but it really helps you start to identify the things that you shouldn't be doing and that you want to delegate, especially the stuff you hate to do and you're not good at that doesn't add a lot of value. So that's the first step, is awareness of what actually takes up your time. So that's all right, I'm trying to get to, so I will stop sharing that. So that's the first step, is to get awareness of that. And then the second step is to actually start delegating those things out.
Okay. So
any questions about that process and how you do it?
I don't see any questions coming through on that. So let's move forward to, how do you delegate? Like, where do you,
so I can
delegate to, what to delegate?
Yeah, so there's an acronym that we have, ASADO, and let me go back to sharing my screen here. And so here's the acronym for how do you actually delegate. So there's 5 steps, ESADO, of how to actually delegate. So the first way to delegate things is to just eliminate it. So stop doing it or defer to next quarter or next year. So we do a lot of things that aren't really super important or that don't have a high impact or that don't have to get done this quarter. Get all that stuff out of your brain. Write it down on a next quarter list, or the biggest thing is just stop doing it. I mean, Warren Buffett is a big fan of grow your stop doing list. If it's not a hell yes, if it doesn't really matter, just stop doing it. There's no hell maybe. Maybe is just hell. So do the things that are hell yes, that are really important, and don't do the other things, or do them later. So that's the first thing. And get all that noise out of your brain, because that will also slow you down, that it's in your brain. The second key.
Before going on, just to clarify, the part that's really important here is write it down somewhere like in a parking lot, so that way you stop thinking about it so you can stay focused.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or just totally get it out of your brain. If you're never going to do it, if you realize, hey, that's just silly, get rid of it. The second thing to do that we started out with is simplify. If you have a 12-step process for onboarding a client, or for doing marketing development, or for evaluating the profitability of a product, see if you can make it into fewer steps. So just save time by simplifying, get other people to look at it for you, ask your employees for feedback. What stupid stuff are we doing? Just every opportunity, how do I make this simpler? Keep asking yourself that question, because if you can take a 10-step process to a 3-step process, that will save time. So the third way to delegate and get rid of stuff is automate. Use software or technology. So is there a productivity app now that will handle it? Is there an Excel spreadsheet? Is there a technology out there? So there's a lot of things that you might have been doing that you can now automate. So it takes less of your time. So definitely do that, automate it. The fourth thing is to actually delegate it to a person. And the key element there, I'll come back to that one because that takes a little bit more, and come back to that. The last one is to outsource it. So there's fractional financial people, there's fractional accounting people, there's virtual assistants, there's tons of stuff. So outsource it. And then I've mentioned a website here. They have a blog where they mention every single app in the world that's a time saver. So like I use Calendly. So when I'm trying to set up an appointment, I just send a link to my calendar, and I don't spend any time going back and forth about when I'm available. So Calendly's one. Believe it or not, there's an app called Thankster that will write thank you notes for you, handwritten thank you notes. I'm a Southerner. My mother would be appalled that there's somebody that does that for you, but
they've got everything these days.
Yeah, that's one that's out there. So there's all kinds of outsourcing. So that's another opportunity. The fourth one here, delegate, where you're literally delegating it to a person in your organization. The biggest thing to be able to delegate is have the right people working for you. So when you start out, you may not have the right people, but define what it makes the right kind of person for you. And then when you're going to hand off a task, you need to document the process. And again, a checklist, it doesn't have to be a big encyclopedia. It can be a one-page checklist like a pilot. These are the key steps. And then you've got to train them, and then you've got to watch them and coach them. And a lot of people say, the biggest complaint I hear about this is, I don't have time to train them. But you may say, well, billing only takes me 30 minutes. But if it's 30 minutes 3 times a week, that's 1.5 or 2 hours a week, and that's 10 hours a month. When you start adding up that cumulative time, you're saving a lot of time, even though you spend some training time to get that off your desk. The other thing is, people say, well, it's not fair to make my employees do scope work. Generally, what you're delegating, they consider it a promotion. Hey, I'm helping the boss do this really important stuff. And the other thing, guess what? They're usually better at it than you are. So you're giving them a promotion, and they're faster at it, and they're happy to do it. So if they interact with a customer or vendor or anybody else, that's a much more positive interaction. So you should look for opportunities to delegate. You're not being unfair to your employees. You're helping develop them, they're learning a new skill, and you're giving your customers a better experience, and you're increasing the whole productivity of the organization because they're doing it better than you were doing it. So don't feel bad about delegating, but you've got to be clear when you hand it off, and then you're gonna try to grab it back when they make a first mistake. But we say people have to hear it 7 times before they totally know it. So you let them you do a checklist, they read it once, that's once. You walk them through it, that's twice. You coach them a couple times after that, so that you're up to 3 or 4, and maybe you have a couple more interactions. So you can't just say, I told them once, this is hopeless, they're not going to get it done. You have to invest a little bit of time to make a good handoff and to be fair to your people.
7 times. I've never heard that before, but it makes a lot of sense because it's very hard to hand things off. And you maybe most people probably, I'm sure, give like 1, 2, maybe 3 chances, and they're like, I'll pull it back. So knowing that you got to give it 7 before it really kicks in is a very interesting statistic.
So again, but it's not like you have to wait 7 weeks. Some people hear better, some people visually with the checklist, some people doing it. So, like I said, you hand them a checklist, that's once, you talk it through, you coach them. So you can get to 7 fairly quickly, but you tell them one time and they don't get it. If that's your expectation, the delegation is not going to work.
Another tool that we haven't talked about, but I use when I delegate to my VA, that's been very, very helpful, is screen recording. So many people, I think that screen recording is something that's only done in professional training videos. But there's a couple apps out there, I think like Screenomatic, Loom is one I use, that you can do straight from your computer and literally have it screenshot, and you can walk through the process and have a recording. So that way they have something they can go back to when you're doing trainings. So there's a lot of tools out there that I think, as you mentioned before, people are very unfamiliar with, that you can either outsource to or to help in the process of training or delegating, that really simplify things, but they're just unknown.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have clients that, some struggle with marketing or social media, and some with finance. And you can hire a full-time person, but you can also hire a fractional person, or even on a project basis. So you may just need a financial person to help you set up your general ledger or show you the key reports that you need to run your business. And you may not have to hire them for many hours every single week, but you can once you get your system set up so that it's repeatable, then that saves you a lot of time, because you have a proven process for looking at your financials the same way you would have a process for any kind of customer service. So fractional people and virtual, and I love having a virtual assistant because I'm only paying them when they're actually working, rather than having somebody in my office that I may not be using every single minute.
So how do you determine, what kind of feedback do you have on how to determine if you should hire someone to fill a need versus outsource the functionality?
It really comes to how much time that job really requires. Again, like the financial part, you probably need, depending upon the size of your business, you may need somebody that's like a controller or a bookkeeper, but a true CFO to set up your chart of accounts, or if you're doing a major expansion or a major project. So the key, what we recommend people do is set up their accountability chart, which is different than an organization chart. That's who's accountable for what, and get really clear what accountabilities you have, and then decide, is that a full person or is it just like the setup phase? So just get really clear on your organization, what outcomes each person owns and what outcomes you need. and then determine if that's a full-time position or not. Part of that is also like a true CFO is very expensive. You may not be able to afford a full-time. So part of it is cost and part of it is what your requirements are.
A lot of companies I work with have controllers, and then they will use a fractional CFO to bring in strategic ideas or extra thinking. So I see that quite often in that mid-size business range.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we've talked about delegating and elevating. You've touched on this a little bit before, but what if you don't have a team to delegate to? What if you're that small or really more contract oriented?
So the first thing we talked about the accountability chart and actually drawing out what each step is. I mean, what each role is. And I've worked with solopreneurs and they're like, what's the point of this? I don't have all these people working for me. But if you realize you're spending time in the social media box, in the marketing box, in the billing box or expense, whatever each of those boxes are, just getting all those roles out of your head and onto an accountability chart. So I can show you a picture of the way that we draw one out, and just give you an idea so we can talk about it. Let me go the other way, sorry. So these boxes are boxes that we use and we put roles inside there. But if you just start drawing out all these boxes for you, so here there's sales and marketing, and that could be one box or two, operations. But I've worked with solopreneurs and we just get all these different functions out of their head and on a piece of paper. So, they're very clear. Customer outreach, customer service, and order taking.
I don't think it's showing the slide you're thinking it is.
All right. Let me make sure. Is it? All right. Well, I'll just stop sharing. I'm not sure what it's doing here, but anyway, I won't distract. But the point is go wild and create all those different boxes. For a moment, that will be overwhelming, but then you can start looking at, okay, how many hours a week do I spend in customer service? Do I need a person that answers the phone and answers questions? Could I hire a person to do that? So the first thing is get all that out of your head. And then what's unique to your, how much time do you have? And then what's unique to your business. So like I worked with one guy that managed apartment or homes for for investors, for individuals that were buying houses. And he had a ton of phone calls, but he could hire a person that would guaranteed to answer the phone in 20 seconds. I mean, there are services like that available. So the first step to decide what to do if you don't have a big staff is get all those roles out of your head and see where you're spending time. And then also go back to that quadrant. What do you love to do? And what are you good at? And then especially things that are less expensive. So you can start knocking them off. And but the first step is to get all those, if you're sitting in 6 seats, get all that out of your head, and then you can deal with it one at a time. What can you do less of, or automate, or actually hire a person?
One thing I say from my experience, because I work with a lot of CEOs, is every CEO that I know is doing something that they shouldn't be doing, that someone else should be doing, or should just not be done at all. One of the questions I ask as I meet new CEOs regularly, partly for the fun of it, because it's interesting to hear their responses, is how many hours do you spend a week doing work you shouldn't be doing, or otherwise delegatable work? And I would say on average, I hear between 30 to 50%, which is just crazy when you think about it. So I think in general, as this is out there, people are hearing this, you're not alone if you're doing way more than you should, and you aren't getting it down on paper to figure out what you shouldn't be doing.
Absolutely. So one of the things we say is don't do $25 an hour work if you can add $200 an hour in value to your business. And I say this all the time, and CEOs laugh because they know they're doing it. And one guy I know, he said his grandfather is his mentor. And he said his grandfather just laughs at him and says, don't be cheap. So yes, you might have to pay $25 an hour for somebody to do that task. But if doing that task is keeping you from creating value in your business of $200 an hour, it's not really a savings.
Yeah. And that's the thing, when people are spending so much time doing that, the next question I often ask is, so what are the things you're not getting to and what's the impact of that? And it's significant on the business. A lot of times the things they're not getting to that are the big strategic things are worth millions and millions of dollars. We're not talking about, a couple $100 here. The $200 is a great example, but usually it's worth a whole lot more than that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things we talk about, so we have a lot of people have heard this term rocks, are key important projects that you need to do that will truly move your business to a different level. But the challenge with rocks are oftentimes those are tasks that are important but not urgent. So urgent things are emails, phone calls, client complaints, that kind of thing that show up on your desk every day. And emails, the biggest time sink. I was just in a meeting last week and I said, you can get your email time down to an hour a week, and they just like exploded. Like, tell me more about that. And if you can't, because just think about all that time and all that distraction, and you could spend. So rocks are projects that are important but not urgent, and you've got to consciously set time for that. So the delegate and elevate part is to consciously stop doing the urgent but unimportant stuff and create time, block out time on your calendar, go away from your office, go to the library or go to a offsite place to make sure you are doing those things that are important, that will change, that will redefine your business and take you to a different level. And that you've absolutely got to do that, because if you're not doing that, then you're spending all your time in that urgent but unimportant zone.
So I've got a question for you, because you said something that I think probably has anybody who's watching this ears ringing right now, and that's getting your emails down to an hour. Can you give us some tips and tricks? How does one actually do that?
Hire a really good admin is the first part. And this is definitely a training process. And, start thinking systematically about your email. What is informational or reading that you don't really need? That are, what you're shopping, can you get rid of those? And so, you've got to work with your admin and train them what's important, and then train them to respond to as many things as possible. And so basically they're going through your email and boiling it down to just the 3 or 4 that, maybe you have to check it once in the morning and once at noon, depending upon your job and the level of interaction. But your key partner in that is your admin, is to teach them. So you've got to invest in teaching them, but you also have to take the time to think. There's really only 4 or 5 categories of, there's informational, reading, client complaints, but when you put them in categories and get clear what the importance level is, then a good admin can screen through all that for you, and you're not the prisoner of your email.
Oh, I actually have a member who did that not long ago with their admin. And at first they were like, there's no way I can do this. How's anyone going to be able to know? And they started categorizing, and got their admin to really understand and just tell them, put the stuff that they must handle that they couldn't, and really bubbled up. Like if it was truly urgent, since they weren't checking their email all the day, they'd send a text and say, hey, you need to go in and look at this. And so he went from being not a believer at all to he's barely looking at his email.
But just think of, I mean, because just turning off the notifications, I got to admit, open and honest, I'm not all the way there yet. But if just the distraction to your brain, if you turn off the automatic notifications, that distraction alone is a 25% productivity increase. But it's going back to that same thing, thinking about, don't just let, the whole point of delegate and elevate, don't just let things hit you. Don't let all the urgent but unimportant. You sat down and thought about your email as a process and categorized, and then were able to communicate to your assistant what they were. And you probably never really thought systematically about, okay, that's long-term reading, that's bills or personal bills, whatever. But when you start putting them in the categories, then you can delegate them and you get back. But just think about that. If you save 4 hours a day, that's 20 hours a week that you can spend in community with your family, exercise. It's huge.
That's a lot of time. One thing for those who may not have an assistant to do that with, that you can even do, is at least set up rules for your inbox. Outlook and a lot of the other services have this, so that it at least filters to folders. So all those reading materials that are informational, who you're getting all those newsletters from. One of them's mine. Don't do this with mine. But, you can have them just funnel to a folder, so that when you have time each week, you can go check out that folder and see which ones might be interesting and you actually want to read. So there's ways to even do this, even when you don't have the structure of support under you, to at least get in a better state, and use tools out there.
Right. Absolutely. And the last thing is just managing your energy, is figure out what your sustainable pace is. So one thing to motivate you to delegate is figure out how many hours a week you can work and be effective. And so Gino Wickman, who wrote the book Traction, that EOS is based on, he's figured out that his sweet spot is 55 hours a week. So he starts 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then he doesn't work outside those hours, and he never works on weekends, and he takes off all of August. And so he's thought consciously about what level of working hours lets him have energy and not be worn down all the time. And a lot of us, the same way a lot of us don't think that way about our email, we don't think that way about targeting our time. And so if you can, as you get better at the delegation process, and as you build your team so you have the right people working for you and you have the right processes, then the final step is getting control of your time and your life and saying, okay, here's my target number, and I'm going to delegate. I'm going to make sure I'm spending my time in the more than $25 an hour zone. And I'm going to keep working on delegation till I get my working time down to that sustainable level. Some people it's 40, for Gino it's 55, some people it's 60. But once you start getting the right people and processes in place, the final step is get it down to what you can do as a sustainable pace. And when you're operating at that pace, the quality of your ideas and your interactions just gets better.
One theme that I've heard throughout this entire conversation that I feel like sums up a lot of it is that we waste a lot of time because we're just not self-aware of how we're wasting it. And the fact, by just thinking through these processes of what it is we're actually doing and making ourselves aware, there's a lot we can just eliminate by getting it down and getting it out of our head and realizing where it's being wasted. And I think that really seems to be a trend through all of the tools you've shared, is to figure out how to document it and then figure out what we should stop doing or delegate out.
Yes. So I think you and I talked about, and I shared with you, Einstein said that simple is the fifth level of intellect, beyond brilliant and beyond genius. And so making things super simple and focusing is not easy. It's work. So each of the steps we talked about, figuring out where you're spending your time, developing processes, it is it is a process and it does take time, but the payoff is you're working at your sustainable pace. And most of that time you're creating really great ideas and a great environment for you, your family, and all your employees.
That's really awesome. I mean, because you're doing the work that you love to do, you're energetic and excited about it rather than doing things that are, I guess, more of a drag, right? Energy wise. We've talked a lot and we've mentioned a couple tools along the way, but I'm curious, what are your favorite tools to use to create efficiency or to outsource or to automate?
So I mentioned Calendly. I love doing that. I like the one thing, another tool for me, I'm trying to get better at is to take the last hour so on the weekend, set my priorities for the week. What are the three big subjects that I want to get done for the week? And then the last hour of the day, wrap up the day and set my priorities for the next day. And Gino says not more than 6 things. And I try to, for me, he's good. He can do 6, me more 4 or 5, but really honestly, big things that I can get done. And so it's not necessarily a technological tool, but just making good use of tying up that last hour of the day. And there's actually some brain science. If you kind of set the project you're going to work on, your brain kind of secretly solves some of those issues for you while you sleep.
I like that.
You've delegated it to your sleeping self. So getting that, closing out the day, so you're not going to bed with a lot of open issues, but closing down your brain and setting your priorities for the next day is huge to just get more done and to eliminate the time wasters.
I like that a lot because the day usually leads you, right? Like something happens, then you start that, or you see an email, and then so the day kind of dictates most people's time rather than that saying, look, I have these 4, 5, 6, whatever it is, things I must get done. And if I'm doing anything else outside of those, then I need to stop that until these are done. If I have time at the end of the day, then yeah, I can get back to these things, or I can prioritize them tomorrow. Or if you really have to replace them because it is urgent and important, you're making a conscious decision to do so rather than it just kind of happening to you. So I like that a lot as a tool to claim your day instead of letting your day claim you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I ask all of my guests this because this is beyond the comfort zone. Or I try to ask all of them and you're laughing. What is something that is beyond your comfort zone that you haven't tried yet that you would love to? It can be personal, it can be business.
I don't know. I've always loved the concept of rock climbing, and so I'd love to. I love the movie Free Solo, but there's no way in heck I've seen El Capitan. There's no way in heck I'm going to be hanging off the edge of El Capitan. But I'm looking at your mountain, and so I would love to get to where I could do that. I mean, just. I would go for I think you can do like bouldering, which is, like 10 feet up, or, or just even a rock climbing gym. It just looks kind of cool to me. And Free Solo, like I said, I'm a chicken. I would never do it, but it looks really cool. And so I think that would be something I've never done that would be fun.
Okay. Well, I may have to. I'm not great with rock climbing. I have tried it, but I have been bouldering. So maybe I'll take you bouldering sometime.
I don't know. It just looks cool. It looks cool. Well, and I'm looking at your mountains inspire me.
Good. I've inspired somebody today. I love it. I really appreciate your time here today. A lot of really good information, great ideas, things to take into account. There's small and simple tools. They're not complicated. And I think that's what's really cool about EOS in general is it's not complicated. It's just something to help us simplify the things we're doing so that we can be more effective.
Yes, less is more.
That
is our guiding principle.
in chat right now how to book a meeting with me, as well as Catherine's site if you're interested in learning more about EOS, or even following up with some questions about today, or setting up some time with her as well. But that's how you can get in touch with both of us for anyone who is interested in continuing the conversation.
Great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And let me. I clicked myself on mute and doing that somehow. Yeah. So what did I say last, just to make sure I didn't leave anything major out?
You mentioned your site, and you were going to put in the chat for you and me.
Perfect. Sorry, guys. I don't know how I did that, but the fun of technology is we talk about it. So one challenge for everybody as you leave here today is to go do something outside your comfort zone, because that's where growth occurs and life begins. Have a great day, everyone.